and welcome to this episode of ArtsAbly in Conversation. My name is Diane Collin. This series presents artists, academics, and project leaders who dedicate their time and energy to a better accessibility for people with disabilities in the arts. You can find more of these conversations on our website, artsably.com, which is spelled ArtsAbly.com. Today, ArtsAbly is in conversation with Emily Schooley, an award-winning actor and filmmaker, and the founder of Laughing Cat Productions, based in Toronto. You can find the resources mentioned by Emily Schooley during this episode on ArtsAbly's website in the blog section.
Think of how many people love you. Clara, think of how many hearts you're gonna break if you go through with this right now. Look at how many people care about you. Look at how many people think that you are going overseas for work. Think of how many people think that you are off to something better.
I am.
You're what?
Welcome back to Broad Strokes, your local arts program for the tri-state area. If you're just joining us now, I'm here in the studio with Chris Preston, the frontman for the American punk band The Flare-Ups, joined via Zoom. They just released their third album, Pharmaceutical Cocktail, and started their national tour. Chris, it's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Likewise, Bill.
Could you tell our viewers a little bit about your band?
Yeah, so we are a cripple punk band. And yeah, I know some audience members might cringe at the use of that particular C word, but it is a specific movement. Cripple punk is all about refusing to conform to able-bodied standards.
So, what's next on the horizon for the Flare-Ups?
Well, once we recover from this tour, whenever that'll be, we're gonna get back in the studio and record our next album. Right now, the working title is Not Covered by Insurance, and we've got a bunch of great disability-related cover tracks. We've got Shiny Flappy People, Can't Stop the Peeing, Pills, Pills, Pills. There's a lot that we're excited to go in and record.
And you feel like this will sell a lot of copies?
Well, we would love to make a lot of money, but Uncle Sam capped our savings at $2,000, which is not enough to live in today's day and age, especially when we are the only ones looking after each other.
Look, before the interview, I thought we agreed that you weren't going to get political here.
Yeah, newsflash for you, buddy. When you're disabled, everything is political. That $2,000 cap means that we are living in poverty, especially with all the rampant inflation. Oh, and then there's the pharmaceutical companies, which keep jacking up the price of the medication that we literally need to survive. You know, not to mention the political parties, where the one side has a major disdain for any minority, to say the least, and the other side, they just shrug and do nothing. So yeah, there is a lot to be angry about, and that is the whole point.
Welcome to this new episode of ArtsAbly in Conversation. Today, I am with Emily Schooley, who is an award-winning actor and filmmaker, and also the founder of Laughing Cat Productions, which is based in Toronto. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Diane.
So you are right now in Toronto, but you didn't grow up in Toronto, right?
That's correct. So I grew up in the Niagara region, which is about kind of 2 hours, just a little bit south of Toronto on Lake Erie. And then from there, I ended up going to university. I went to the University of Waterloo. So I've moved around kind of like the southwestern end of our province a fair bit. But yeah, since then I've been in Toronto officially since 2010. And, you know, I work here, and then I also, I tend to travel and work kind of regionally and internationally as well. So based in Toronto now, but I think of myself as somebody who is both very globally inspired, and I love traveling outside of the city to work as well.
But you attended a school for the arts with over the Niagara region, or what happened to your first artistic practices that led you to where you are today?
So for me, it's interesting because my journey as a creative artist has really evolved over the years, where I originally went to university thinking, okay, well, I'm going to specifically train as an actor for theater, and that's what I went into university doing. I did a lot of drama and theater when I was in high school as well, so that's kind of really what led me to want to be a performer. But from there, kind of what happened was after I had shortly graduated university, I ended up getting a lot of auditions for film rather than for theater stuff. So I kind of immediately went, okay, well, I've trained as a theater actor, but now I'm going to try out film. And then from there, what happened was one of the first directors who cast me in a film project, he and I ended up working quite closely together for a number of years. So kind of through him, I got my feet wet with producing, directing, writing, all of that kind of at a more indie level. So it ended up that with one of the projects that I worked on with him, I started as, quote unquote, just the lead actor. And I went from that to helping co-write the series, helping kind of production manage, as you do with indie arts, and then helping direct as well. Because I also, one of my side hobbies is still photography. So I have a bit of an eye as well when it comes to, cinematography, kind of setting up the shot, like what am I looking for? And then as well as a director, being able to work with other actors and, helping them reach an emotional place, helping them kind of like choreograph or tell the story that we want to tell when we're working on a project. So I went into that project that I was working on with the director who'd hired me going, okay, well, I'm mostly just an actor. And I came out of that one. We had actually produced a half an hour series with a double length pilot. So it was about 13 episodes total. And through that was really my boot camp in terms of learning sort of the behind the camera skills. And then since then in my career, I've done a lot of both, sometimes at the same time, but anytime I get to be just an actor these days, it kind of feels like a vacation. So yeah, I still perform, I still direct. Those are kind of my two favorite things to do. But I also produce my own work, which is what led me to founding Laughing Cat Productions.
When did you found this company?
So I produced kind of smaller work sort of casually off and on for years under the name, but we ended up incorporating officially at the end of 2020.
And but you did before that, you did a lot of acting and you were recognized internationally too. So you were saying you were doing both at the same time. What's the feeling between both? When you say when you are an actor, it feels more like a holiday today than producing, which I understand. But can you explain to us what are both sides of your position, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I'm somebody with ADHD, which I didn't know for years. I always thought I was just like a slightly quieter than some of the other theater kid, because like anybody who's comes from that kind of performing space, like we're all a little bit chaotic, we're all a little bit like energy, go go go. And for me, for years, it's always like, oh, I can do one more thing, I can learn this other skill, I can do this other thing. And a lot of that fed into my acting practice. But what I've ended up doing is that because I like to challenge myself, sometimes on my own projects, it's like, okay, well, I'm both the lead actor and the director. And then just with the way that film tends to work, unless you have millions of dollars, you're wearing a lot of hats yourself. So I've also I've learned to produce as well. And then that's actually what I did on a few of my short films. But for me, I think for me too, part of it was always trying to find a ceiling and what I could actually successfully accomplish. And then I finally hit that point kind of last year, the year before, where I went, okay, well, I'm only one person. I can accomplish one substantial project at a time where I'm doing these things, and that's about it. I can't do multiple projects. I can't be working at a 7-figure budget level if it's just me. So I kind of hit a point where I found the ceiling where I'm like, okay, well, if I'm producing and directing, sometimes maybe acting, I can do this much. So it was kind of nice to find, being like, okay, well, now that I know that, now I can kind of specialize down a little bit more again. And then so I've always kind of relied on that neurospiciness, that ADHD, to be like, okay, I can do this and this and this, and then it all kind of blends together in my mind, where like I always say, like, I feel like I'm a little mushroom, where where you see like the little mushroom above the soil, and that's the part that you see, but the part that you don't see is like the mycelial network underneath, where it's so interconnected to everything. Like, to me, that's very much kind of how I've always sort of drawn on creativity and how I build my creative work, where everything is sort of that yes and. But knowing what I can do successfully, for me now, it's nice to take a step back and go, okay, well, I just want to act in this project, so I'm going to audition for somebody else's piece and then collaborate with them. Or be like, okay, well, I'm going to produce and direct this project, but I'm not going to act on this one this time. And then that's kind of, being able to take a hat off in a way. But for me, I found, starting with my training as an actor, it really kind of fed into the other disciplines, because I could go, okay, well, I know what works for me to get me, emotionally present or deeper into a scene, or being able to achieve a genuine reaction on camera, things like that. So that's fed into my directing. And then I would say as well, probably a lot of it is anxiety, where I'm like, I like to know what's going on and have things organized. And on some indie productions, that's not always the way it goes. So I think that's kind of how I learned to produce, for better or worse, was like, my anxiety just wanted everything to be organized. But I've also realized too, it's like kind of in the world of film, I'm really good at being sort of a creative or logistical producer. But for me, the business skills are not really kind of my favorite thing, like to be doing a lot of paperwork or trying to find the funding. So one of the things I'm working on right now is, because we've already raised substantial funding for a couple Laughing Cat Productions projects, is looking for another producer to bring on board to kind of help finally share that workload, so that our projects can continue to grow and be successful.
As a producer, the nice thing is that you can choose your subjects and choose the scripts and choose the scenarios, whatever the authors. So how do you choose the productions you want to bring life?
So
bring
for me,
to life, sorry.
oh, it's okay. So for me, the way I kind of choose things to bring to life is that I'm very personally passionate about creating queer woman-led media specifically. And we have kind of quite a gap in that market, where, we're finally getting shows like Yellow Jackets, or, films like Backspot, where there's just normalized queer woman-led stories. But, when you look at what's out there for men, gay men, straight men, whatever, they outnumber what's out there for women 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 5 to 1. So for me, it's always like, is there kind of an underheard or underrepresented woman's voice in the story? That's one of the big draws for me as well. And then also, is there something in here that kind of provokes social change or more inclusive thought, or, bringing to screen somebody's life who we don't really hear or see a lot of stories from somebody from that demographic. So for example, it's like we do get the occasional large scale feature film done by like a really big known name, where, it'll touch on something like poverty or disability, or even like fat phobia, things like that. But a lot of those films tend to be produced from more privileged voices. So for me, as someone who grew up working class, as someone who grew up in a mid-sized body, especially in like the 90s and 2000s, where people wanted you to be super slim, I also experienced a lot of exclusion in the film industry, just because I was not essentially what they were looking for. So for me, I'm now drawn to tell those stories, like the stories that we don't hear, the people like, we still don't see enough of on screen. So that's really what I look for, where it's like, who is this character? How are they different from kind of mainstream media out there? How is the story different? How does this better society? Because the other thing I look for as well, where it's like we have a lot of what I'm going to call content churn, where like a lot of stuff's getting made. People will, watch something on streaming, but they won't remember that series 6 months later. It's like, I like to make things that get into people and kind of hook them, stick with them, where, they'll come back and think about the film in a year from now and go, and go, oh, oh, I am seeing this play out in society. Funnily enough, Emily was right, things like that. So,
Sometimes even a shorter film. I saw one of your movies called Crypt Metal Interview, and this one was really awesome. And you in that movie, there is, do you know the typical reaction, or in that short film, there's a typical reaction of the interviewer that says, "Oh, I thought we would agree that we won't talk about politics." And,
yeah.
and your character says, "Everything in disability is political, so how can I not talk about it?"
Oh
And
yeah. And
yeah,
yeah,
that,
and so Crypt Metal Interview. So that was a sketch done with Sick Bay, which is a disability focused sketch troupe that I work with. Yeah. The people that benefit from the silence of those being oppressed are the ones that will try to keep perpetuating that silence, or kind of, try to keep that power dynamic in play. Whereas, like, I'm someone very much where, I believe that none of us are going to thrive until everyone can thrive. So a lot of the work I do is ultimately about creating a world where that can happen. Yeah.
and also breaking assumptions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's very nice. So, in your recent project, you have one interesting upcoming project that is coming. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So I made a short film. We actually shot back in 2022, and then it's been on about the festival circuit for about a year now. But it's a short film about a chronically ill woman who chooses MAID. And the film is about her best friend kind of finding out the 11th hour and then confronting her about her choice. Where, yeah, we've been on the festival circuit for about a year. And coming up in May, we actually have two screenings here in Ontario. We're going to have one May 15th in Alliston at the Circle Theatre as part of a collective of independent filmmakers. And then I don't quite have the date yet because they're still finalizing the schedule, but the film will also be part of the Grand River Film Festival at the end of May, happening in Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge area. So for me, in a way, the project kind of feels a little bit full circle where, having been a U Waterloo student, where we filmed the film was actually literally along the Grand River, where the Airbnb that we shot at, it's a property managed by a friend of mine. Like, the Grand River literally went through the backyard. So being able to screen there, especially as someone who, grew up in Waterloo region, was there for a number of years. And like, I remember when Ken Nakamura started that festival in 2007, like, I'm almost more excited to screen there than if we got into TIFF. Like, just kind of based on sort of the connections I have and kind of the way the film came about, who I made it with, where we made it. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to both of those screenings.
So, this movie is it a production with multiple actors, or is it just a story of this person?
So it's two actors, and with this film, I did the thing we were talking about earlier, where I wrote it, I was in front of the camera as a lead actor, I directed with my cinematographer, and then I did about 80 to 90% of the actual producing labor. So it was a lot, but yeah, basically the story is a two-hander drama. So it's myself playing the character Clara, who is the one that's choosing to undergo MAID, and then her best friend Sky, who is played by Selma Darcy, who's another very talented Toronto actor.
Well, congratulations, because it's a
Thank
big
you.
achievement. And we're going to post all the details on ArtsAbly's website so that people can have a look and know more about the dates and everything. Yeah, so that's great. And do you have after this movie is streamed and after this movie is featured in festivals, do you have other things that are coming in the next few months that you're working on, or?
I do. So I've got a few things that are in earlier development right now. And then with The Sweetest Goodbye as well, we're hoping to still screen kind of at a few more festivals before we wrap up and then move on to VOD. But in the short term, I actually just got my first paid literary submission. So I'm going to be part of an anthology that's coming out later this year. We're still kind of waiting on a release date for that, but that should be, I think, probably summer or fall. And that was done in collaboration with Workman Arts here in Toronto. As well, I've got some Canada Council funding for a short film. So that's going to be in production later this fall. We're we're still kind of getting some details together for that, but I'm really looking forward to that. It's funny, I've actually become a little bit superstitious where like I don't talk a lot about projects unless they're like finally like done and ready to screen. But outside of that, I'm developing some feature film content. We actually had a really, really good reception for The Sweetest Goodbye in Brazil last year. So because of that, I've made a lot of like really good connections in like the Sao Paulo and Virginia areas. So I'm developing a feature film with one of the filmmakers I met there. I'm developing some other kind of feature length work as well. And then I'm also developing a genre series that we're hoping to be able to release an interactive digital prequel for that. And then there would also be kind of like a 1 hour streaming or broadcast component as well. So I'm very much right now, I'm looking for the right people, the right partnerships to help sort of elevate mine and Laughing Cat Productions work to the next level and then help bring these projects to life.
You mentioned international connections through this production company, but also as an actress, right? You also performed in international projects.
Yeah. So I'm, for better or worse, because I've been sort of so heads down in grant writing, trying to get funding, trying to develop some of my own work. I've had to take like acting's had to take a little bit of a backseat over the last couple of years for me, but I'm at a point now where I've realized kind of how much I miss doing that element of the creativity because not necessarily the downside, but as sort of, the necessary evil that comes with running a production company where 90% of my days these days are admin and paperwork and strategy and looking for grants and writing grants and looking for funding and trying to build partnerships. And so much of it has been kind of the business and logistics side of it where, yeah, it's been kind of over the last couple of years where I haven't really done much on screen. I shouldn't say that, it's not nothing, but like, I did the sketch stuff with Sick Bay. I shot my film. Selma and I actually worked together on another project just a few months ago. So that was her first time producing. But yeah, I'm at a point where I am looking to start doing more acting again. And, I've just got to get some new headshots done, but looking for more projects to audition for and be part of. And then we're still nailing out the details, but I'm supposed to be shooting a film this summer as well with a filmmaker I've known for over a decade who's out of Montreal. So there's a few irons in the fire, but kind of, especially for me who likes to be busy and on the go, there's not quite as much as I would like of the creative. And then as well, it's been a few years since I've been represented by an acting agent, so I'm also on the lookout for another agent as well who, also understands kind of the multidimensionality, the multi-passionate that I do, but also supports my work as an actor. So we'll see where that hunt goes, and we'll see who ends up being the best fit there.
Did you work with the production company? Did you work with the project called Squeaky Wheel?
I did, yeah. Yeah, so I was in that. Funnily enough, that was also the segment I was in was also about MAID. So that's been kind of a theme over the last couple of years. But yeah, and then they're actually nominated for 2 Canadian Screen Awards right now. So that's been very exciting. Yeah,
So
Andrew, the lead producer of that, I had met actually through the Disability Screen Office a couple of years ago. And then they had me come out to be part of one of the episodes, which is really nice, where I think I had actually missed like the main auditions for the core casting, but it was nice to kind of be able to just like step in for an episode. And then yeah, very supportive set, very, very collaborative. And then yeah, there are a lot of talented folks working on the show, and that is all disability centric comedy, which is, it's really nice to see kind of how far people will push things, and like it's very like almost reminiscent of like a little bit of like that 90s 2000s SNL vibe as well, kind of has made its way in there.
and people can watch this on AMI TV online
Yes.
also. So if you want to discover that, that's a very, very funny show that has very short episodes and always by disabled with topics that are frequently mentioned and in a very fun way. So yeah, I recommend watching that.
Yeah. Yeah, and funnily enough, yeah, the sketch I did was a lot more funny than a lot more of a humorous take on Made than my film, where and I'll share as well too, just kind of a brief anecdote where what the genesis of my film, The Sweetest Goodbye, was very much because of Bill C7 passing here in Canada, where Made is now opened up to people that are not terminally ill, but kind of quote unquote decreased quality of life. And as I'm sure like what we're seeing is that people have applied for Made because they can't get safe housing, which is, I I understand why to some degree it's not being made as much of a big deal in the news as it should be, but what I think a lot of people who only consume mainstream news or who aren't a part of any kind of equity out community don't realize is just like how dangerous it is, essentially, where people are not being provided with the supports they need to live a thriving life, and then they're choosing to end their life because they don't have that support. Whereas a lot of this could be mitigated if we had a UBI, or if people living with disabilities had adequate financial, adequate medical, adequate housing, other levels of support they need to thrive. And I think this is kind of something systemic too, where in Canada, abroad, we're seeing more and more of a disparity between the ultra wealthy and everybody else. And that's kind of ultimately what's underneath this. But for me, and this is kind of like I was saying earlier, where I like to include sort of social impact themes in my work, I thought it was very, very kind of timely to address this and address it's not just, oh, I'm sick and I want to die. It's I want to die because I'm so sick of being made to feel less than or othered or unsupported by society that I feel I have no other choice. And that's, like I don't want to take things too dark or too bleak here, but like I think a lot of people don't think about or realize how much social exclusion, how much kind of living in poverty, living without adequate resources that you see other people getting contribute to the mindsets that can lead up to that as well, where I think it's an important topic to address and think about, and going, if we made more of an effort to create equity in society, to reduce income inequality, to make things more accessible, a lot of people wouldn't be having the struggles they're having simply because they're under-resourced.
It's true, and by making movies about it, in a way, people can see an aspect of life that they didn't really think of. And it's also ties to my other question about what you think of the impact of the arts in the disability community, or working in disability culture, or creating more accessibility in the arts. Can you tell us what you think the role of arts is in the disability culture?
Well, I think overall, arts and disability culture, or arts in any culture, is a way of both expressing yourself, learning about yourself, telling your stories, but then as well, it's it goes back to the Paleolithic times with the handprint on the wall. It's a way of saying, I was here, this is my story, this is what I experienced. But especially in terms of accessibility, this is the hill that I will die on. Part of accessibility to me is adequate funding and adequate inclusion, where, even with, say, like Ontario Arts Council, disabled artists can only get up to $10,000, but a media artist who does not apply under the disability category can get up to $40,000 to make their work. So something like that, to me, like, there's still a weird inequity there, where, if I apply to Ontario Arts Council as a filmmaker versus a disabled filmmaker, I'm treated a little differently. And so that's even within an arts body within Canada, where that discrepancy still exists. And again, too, this kind of just goes back to, there's sort of an inherent, in some areas, I will say, like an inherent like elitism or exclusionaryism that comes with certain areas of like mainstream media, mainstream arts, where, we're told we need to look a certain way, behave a certain way, have a certain set of ideals that, we blend in, and we don't rock the boat on politics or genocide or income inequality or any number of topics. But, it's kind of going back to like what you mentioned earlier, where you watch the Crip Metal sketch and everything is political because it's had to be. But yeah, but in terms of accessibility in the arts, it's a lot of it too, I think, is like being made to feel safe, seen, and included in spaces where a lot of the times it's clear that people don't think about including other people because they've never had to, because the world has always catered to them in some way, or they've never felt unwelcome or excluded in a room, or somebody's never had to think about, okay, well, how am I going to get in there? Or, watching films, how do I understand what's on screen if I can't see, hear, whatever? People that have more privilege, people that have more access, they've never had to make room or they never think about making room because they've never had to, essentially. Mm-hmm. Whereas, yeah, like I think too, part of it too, I think, and this goes back to the whole like financial equity, but also being paid equally for equal work. Whereas, one of our most pervasive attitudes in society is, oh, everybody has to earn a living, which I think is one of the most messed up things. Where the system that we're under, like we're told we need to function under capitalism, where we have to produce a certain way to be successful. We have to look a certain way to be successful. And I think the arts in general, but especially disability arts, is so counterculture to that in a very beautiful way, where you can produce amazing works of art that the financial value is really, really irrelevant. And I think to me too, accessibility is also, just even having the support you need to be able to thrive in the same way that somebody who's not disabled can. Whereas, for example, I have one of my filmmaker friends, they shoot on iPhone or they shoot on a small camera, just because, the weight of like a physical cinema camera is 20, 30 pounds. And not everybody can lift that. Like, to me, if I was hauling that around for days at a time, I'd be very sore as well. So, even thinking about that too, where it's adapting tools to what can I use that suits me versus, oh, you have to fit into this standard to be taken seriously.
Yeah. But today, fortunately, to our advantage, we live in a society that grows very fast and evolves. And one of the things that I always found amazing is the possibility of finding a new tool that is smaller, that is more efficient. I'm thinking of this advertisement that Apple did with their phone filming. The filmmaker was someone with vision impairment, and he was able to film a whole movie with an iPhone. And it was the story of how he was managing the limitation of his the way he could see the whole scene, and the way he adapted with the new tools. And I find it hopeful in a way to think of, okay, so we have more and more tools that are built for everybody. So like the universal design concept, right? It's built for everybody. Everybody can use the last iPhone, but it helps some artists to be able to create in another way, and it helps with visual descriptions, and it helps with I don't know, it connects with hearing aids, and it's the evolution today is better and better. And I wonder if you feel that this impact in your industry.
I think we're definitely in a very, very interesting time when it comes to the intersection of like technology, art making, what the future is and even kind of the future of humanity itself. But, I think any tool that we have should be able to serve us and serve all of us. So, you know, even for example, while there's described video, there's also ways of like even making dialogue, making on-screen content more accessible. Where,
Yeah.
if somebody says, "Oh, I can't believe you're wearing that ugly pink sweater," for example, like that could, like even something like that in a line of dialogue in a film can make sort of visual descriptions or kind of conveying that a little bit easier for people that are, hard of sight, blind, semi, things like that, where it's like there's both technological ways and there's also just intuitive ways that maybe we haven't thought about before. But yeah, I think like because we're living in the age that we are, people, regardless of, financial background, whatever, should be able to access the same tools that the ultra wealthy can access. And I think there's a lot of ways to incorporate that into, making performance, making films, even creating visual art, where for me, like I'm someone that I just ethically, I can't really deal with a lot of AI use, especially because like knowing what it does for the environment.
Mhm.
But, like even just on my iPhone, there's so many accessibility tools built in where it'll do like an automatically, it can describe something to you, it can read things back, it can like it's everybody should have access to these.
I do work in assessment of accessibility assessments of buildings, and this iPhone has a tool of, I mean, it's been there forever, but people barely know it. It's a tool that can not only measure the distance between 2 points, but it can also measure the inclination of a ramp, for example, things like that. And it's so easy now, compared to the time where we were using tools with a, wooden
Yeah.
whatever calculation.
It's almost getting at the stone and chisel to make sure the ramp is yeah.
So yeah, I'm kind of grateful for these tools, and I know totally what you mean by including more. For example, captions. There are fun ways to include captions in an artistic project. And that's something to think about. What can I do with these boring captions that are helpful for following and reading? But is there a way I can include that in the artistic project?
Yeah, or even a way to, oh, she grumbles or she like, yeah.
I have to admit, I'm not that good. I need to work with some people because my captions, I do captions with these kind of episodes, but it would be text captions. And uh, so I that's something I would really need advice or a partner to make these captions more fun or more useful sometimes. But anyway,
Well, and
thank you
there's
very
there's
much.
little ways too, because you can go, like, oh, the music is like a '90s smooth, sexy jam, or like
Mhm.
just kind of throwing in those, those spicy fun adjectives there, where yeah, little things like that. But yeah, and I think too, yeah, just partnership in general is so helpful. I think especially even looping back to the earlier conversation around accessibility, where having somebody else's energy, having somebody else's insight, somebody who, even if you've had very similar lived experiences, will still have somewhat of a unique lens on the world. Where I think being able to share things with each other, share things in community, share things in partnership, I think that's just crucial for all of us.
Mhm. Well, thank you. I have a last question. And it's about people who might have been able to um, motivate you or counted in your career or in life generally. Do you have someone to think of who really counted in your career? And can you tell us who this person is and why?
Absolutely. So I've got a few in mind actually, but I'll start just very quickly. I want to mention the Disability Screen Office. So they're a film and television focused organization working on bringing more inclusivity to both how media is produced and as well as representation on screen. So, you know, that's something else to kind of just circling back again to accessibility, where nothing about us without us, to kind of borrow that slogan. Where, and I know the DSO is working on bringing better representation to screen, to writers' rooms. You know, if there are disabled stories being told, we should be in positions of power as the ones telling that story, not just as like a side character hired here and there for the day. But in terms of people specifically, I want to mention Sasha Borsma, and she's one of the founders of Sticky Brain Studios. So I had originally met her through WIFT a couple of years ago, the Women in Film and Television Network, and she just so she's building up. Sticky Brain is a video game company. They have a few different games launched on, like, your Android apps or your iPhone apps. Rooster's in there. There's also one called Kimono. But basically, kind of both between the way she runs her company and also just the way that she makes education very accessible. I've always I have so much love and admiration for Sasha, because she's done so much to build communities, to support community, to help educate, to help make her own workplace accessible. And I guarantee, like most of us, she's probably only being paid a tenth of like what her knowledge and value actually is worth. But she had, I think, actually thinking back, I think she and I originally met in person. It was through a course that I did with WIFT, where getting prepared to apply for a certain level of funding, and just she was teaching kind of like budgeting and cash flow and things like that, and just the way that she approached kind of sharing the information, teaching, making it accessible, it was such a breath of fresh air. And just she's brilliant. She works incredibly hard. And I think even with her studio too, even with Sticky Brain, I'd say they're probably one of the industry leaders in terms of modeling building an accessible workplace and creating room for, caretaking needs, disability related needs, like mental health time, things like that. Like being able to build and adapt a workflow to actually support diverse workers and support needed accommodations. I'm so impressed by everything she does. And she just goes a long way to reach out and serve a number of communities as well. So the women in gaming community, women in television. And then as well, she was teaching for a while too. So she was also impacting a lot of students she was at Centennial for their their advanced media and film program. So yeah, I'm just so impressed by everything she does, just how generous she is with her time, her knowledge, her energy. And if anybody of the major funders are listening, definitely give her all the money, because she deserves it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing part of your career and life with us.
And then thank you for having me, Diane. I think it's really important to have these conversations too, where, in some ways we're told it's like, oh, well, to be a successful artist, you have to be making millions of dollars and in Hollywood blockbusters and this, that, and the other thing. And I think that's not the reality that most of us face, where we're either juggling an artistic career with a day job to get by, or we're doing the arts full time, but we're just we're living paycheck to paycheck. We're hanging in there. It's perpetual free fall, always looking for the next project, always looking for the next opportunity, and then, celebrate the successes. But it's been an interesting journey for me too, because I've been at this for well over a decade now. And that's something I realized too, where it's the version of success I was told I could have may or may not ever happen. But to me too, it's very rewarding for me to meet other people from the community, to collaborate and build up these projects and these stories kind of one day and one project at a time.
Well, it's an important topic, and it's great that it's happening. So we're going to see that in May at your screening. And thank you again. And I wish you a great day. And maybe talk soon in the community.
Absolutely. Thank you, Diane. I hope you have a good day as well.
Thank you. Bye, Emily.